who doesn't do that anymore, and it's not the same. It's much less fun. So, now I got to talk again, I suppose. And maybe I start with a little story. Because in a few weeks coming from now, it will be the range retreat. The range retreat is a period of the year that the monks spend 3 months in one place and we don't travel. This is a tradition from the time of the Buddha. We just stay in one place to meditate. Let me put my glasses on so I see if you are actually not asleep. Oh no, everybody's paying attention. And that range retreat will be coming up in 3 months. I'm looking forward to it. You too, Venerable? Yeah. And there's a story that there was once a range retreat a long time ago. And there was this monk staying in a hut. And there was a family who was supporting him because as monks we are reliant on the lay people. We cannot grow our own food, so we rely on lay people for food. The lay people give us shelter and food, and in exchange, hopefully we can teach you some ways to meditate, deal with life, these kind of things. This creates like an interconnection between the lay people and the monks. So the monks always have some connection with the lay people, so we always check if we are behaving well, and it always creates a nice community. Either way, this monk was supported by a family, a farmer, his wife, and their daughter. And the monk lived in that hut for 3 months. And every day, the farmer, his wife, and the daughter would bring food to the monk. And the monk, very grateful for the food, meditated very well. But after the 3 months was over, he needed to move on, go back to see other monks, back to the monastery. And the farmer said, "Please don't leave us. You've been teaching us, and we've been feeding you. It's been so nice together. Can you please stay?" And the monk said, "No, sorry, I have to go. I have other duties." However, during my meditation, I developed some psychic powers. And I saw that there is a treasure buried nearby this farm. And I will tell you how to find the treasure in exchange for all the food that you've given me." "Oh," said the farmer, please tell me, how can I get the treasure?" "Yes," said the monk. "What you need to do is grab a bow and arrow, put the arrow on the bow and let it fly. Let the arrow fly, and wherever the arrow lands, that is where you will find the treasure. And I am a monk, and monks don't lie, so you can believe this to be true." "Thank you so much," said the farmer. "Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Tomorrow I will do it. What time do I do it?" And then the monk said, "You have to shoot the arrow in the direction of the sun. No, point the arrow in the direction of the sun when the sun is just above the horizon, and then let the arrow fly." "Thank you," said the farmer. And then the monk left. The next morning, of course, the farmer couldn't wait. He couldn't sleep all night to give this a shot. It's just like kids when it's Christmas, you know. He was going to find this treasure. So in the morning, he stood with his wife and his kid. They stood on the doorstep of their house. This is actually where the monk told them to stand. Had the arrow on the bow, pulled the bow back, and let the arrow fly. And the arrow flew. And where it landed, they took a spade and started digging. Digging. For a long time, the farmer was digging, but no treasure he could find there. What is this? Thought the farmer. The monk told me that there would be treasure where the arrow landed if I let it fly. And monks don't lie. So I must have done something wrong. Then suddenly came a man walking up. Hey, why are you digging in my garden? This wasn't the merchant living next door. What are you doing here? And the farmer said, oh, I'm sorry, but I had this monk staying and he told me if I shoot an arrow in the direction of the sun in the morning, standing on my doorstep, and wherever it landed, I would find treasure. Oh, said the merchant, but I know why you didn't find the treasure. Look at you. You're all frail, all very old. You should let me shoot the arrow, because I am much stronger than you. All right, and then we will share the treasure that we find and split it 50-50. How about that? Well, the farmer didn't really have a choice, so he said, okay, we can do that. Next morning, they were very excited again. Standing on the doorstep were now the farmer, the merchant, the farmer's wife, and their daughter. And now this time, the merchant had the bow. And when the sun reached above the horizon, the merchant pulled back the arrow and shot in the direction of the sun. And the arrow flew much further than when the farmer shot it, because the merchant was more strong. And where the arrow landed, they took the spade. And this time, it was the farmer's wife who had to do the digging, because the farmer was still tired from yesterday. So the farmer's wife digging, and I couldn't find the treasure again. What is this? And what happened? Another angry man came walking up. What are you doing digging in my garden? It was a general of the army. They shot the arrow straight into the garden of the general. And the general said, what are you doing? And then the merchant says, well, it's not my fault. It's the farmer who told me to dig here. And then the farmer said, well, it's not my fault. It was the monk who told me to dig here. He said, shoot an arrow in the direction of the sun in the morning, and monks don't lie. And then the general was like, yeah, you're right, monks don't lie, so there must be something wrong. I know what it is. You, merchant, you're not strong enough to shoot the arrow. Next day, I will shoot the arrow. Okay, next morning, now there were the farmer, his wife, and the daughter, the merchant, and the general, standing all on the doorstep of the farmer's house, where the monk told them to stand and let the arrow fly. Now, the general this time took the bow, and while the general was like a bodybuilder, what's this guy called? Schwarzenegger, yes. How do you know that I was thinking about Schwarzenegger? Yes, of course. Schwarzenegger was this general. And he took the bow. Wow, so much tension in the bow. And he shot the arrow in the direction of the sun. And the arrow flew and flew and flew. And it landed. It went over a wall, actually, and landed behind the wall. The wall was the wall around the king's palace. But they had to go in, and they took the spade. This time it was the merchant's time to dig. So the merchant started digging. After hours of digging, still no treasure. And who came out? The king, of course. And the king walked up to them. What are you doing digging in the palace grounds? You should go to jail. They said, the general said, I'm sorry, it's not my fault, it's the merchant's fault. He told me to do it. The merchant said, oh, it's not my fault, it's the farmer's fault. He told me to do it. The farmer said, oh, it's not my fault, it's this monk who stayed at my place. And he said to let the arrow fly pointing in the direction of the sun in the morning, and we would find treasure. and monks don't lie. The king was, yeah, you're right, monks don't lie. So, what happened? Next morning, the king, the general, and the merchant actually went to find the monk. Because this monk, the king thought, must have been lying. And now the monk should actually go to jail because he made people do all this hard work and digging in each other's garden and even in the palace grounds. So they went to find the monk. And they found the monk. And they brought the monk to the farmer's house. And the king said, you should go to jail because you've been lying. And the monk said, no, monks don't lie. Well, said the king, you told them to stand here in the morning and take the arrow and shoot in the direction of the sun. And then the monk said, I never said anything about shooting. I just said, put the arrow in the bow and let it fly. And then the king, the general, and the merchant suddenly understood. When they stood on the doorstep, they just had to let the arrow fall straight down. That was what the monk had been telling them, not to shoot. So they took a spade and dug, found a big treasure, and they split it evenly between the king, the merchant, and the farmer. And it was enough money for the farmer, the merchant, and the general to live a happy life. And the moral of this story is, we're always shooting after things, going after things. We point to the future. That is where we hope to find happiness. It's like we point the arrow of our desires and shoot always off somewhere in the distance. But if you can be content in the present and just let things go and be where you already are, then you will find happiness. And I am a monk, and monks don't lie. So you can trust this. It's quite a nice story. Ajahn Brahm tells it quite often. I don't know where it comes from. But it also reminds you of this quote that I read out yesterday from the Buddha. Don't revive the past or yearn for the future. The past is gone. The future hasn't arrived. Be aware of what happens in the present. Practice to be aware of it, unmoved, unshaken. And it sounds all very easy, I know, just to talk about being in the present moment and don't think about the future or the past. But who of you has been meditating and has been thinking in their meditation during this retreat about the future or the past? Yeah, this is very natural. And also this morning I was sitting meditation in my hut, and I thought, oh, present moment. But what did my mind do? Started thinking about what can I talk about during this talk. Very natural, of course. So I forgave myself straight away, or didn't get angry, like, okay, my mind is thinking about what I'm going to talk about. However, that's not what I want to do right now during meditation, or because during meditation, I try to quiet my mind. So I thought this morning I'd talk a bit about how to quiet your mind, how to quiet the thoughts, and then maybe also talk a bit more about kindness and forgiveness, because those were some topics of the questions yesterday. How does that sound? Is that a good idea? Or do you want something else? Okay. I think that's a good idea, because everybody has thoughts going on in their meditation. And there's various ways to deal with it, because even the Buddha had some struggled with thoughts before he was enlightened. And there's some suttas, some texts, we call them suttas, talking about that as well. And I'll sort of talk about those texts in a bit of a roundabout way. I don't want to read out the text because if you just read the text, it's a bit boring. So I'll just talk about them using other similes and stuff. So this morning I was sitting in my hut meditating, and instead of just being peaceful in the present, started thinking, what can I talk about? Can I talk about the arrow, letting the arrow fly? Yeah, the story, I'll talk about that. Shall I talk about that? And then at some point I realized the more I think about it, most of the things I'm not going to say anyway, because it's much nicer just to improvise stuff. That's how we're trained as monks anyway. So I realized, okay, these thoughts are not helpful right now, because it always feels, if we plan for the future, if we have it all set out what is going to happen, that then we are best prepared for the future if we just think it through a lot. But this is actually often not the case. Often we think way too much about the future. And especially for me, giving these talks, as I said, if I think about them beforehand, I almost never say what I think I will say. And with the future is always like that. It never turns out the way you want it to be, or the way you think it will be. Maybe not the way you want it to be, but the way you think it will be. Whatever you think it'll be is always going to be different. So all these thoughts are not really preparing us for the future, really. They're mainly just our anxieties or our insecurities or just our restlessness or just our habits to think so much. But we give so much value to the thoughts. We think our thoughts are trustworthy and that our thoughts are the best thing ever. We can always rely on our thoughts, we think. We just think it through, we'll find the answers. But through meditation and through life, you'll find that many of our thoughts are just garbage, really. You can't really trust your thoughts as much as you think. So this is one thing you can do in your meditation, to just reflect on your thoughts. Are they really helping me? Or am I just getting stuck in the thoughts? Usually you'll find you just happen to think the same thoughts over and over again, isn't it? You just go into a loop. And that reminds me actually of another story. There was an old, wise woman living on top of a mountain. An old, wise woman. Usually in these stories, it's always an old, wise man living on top of the mountain, isn't it? So I thought, for a bit of gender equality, this time it was an old, wise woman living on top of the mountain. The old, wise man always has a beard in this story, so this old, wise woman also has a beard in this story. I don't know why I say that. This is... You never know what's coming out of your mouth during these talks, as I said. Anyway, old wise woman with a beard living on top of a mountain. And people in the village below knew there was this old wise woman. So every day they would come up and ask the old wise women. And they would ask and complain about their partners, about their job, about their family, about their health. And the old wise woman, she would always answer. One day she actually told a joke about a carpenter who cut his hand off. And the people were laughing. It was a good joke. A little bit rude, but funny anyway. And they left. And the next day they came back up to the mountain again. And they started complaining and asking questions about their partner, about their job, about their family, about their health. And the old wise woman answered the question and told the joke again about the carpenter cutting his hand off. And okay, the people laughed again, but not as hard as last time, of course. They left again. Next day came back up the mountain and they complained and asked questions again about their partner, about their job, about their family, about their health. And the old wise woman answered the questions and told the joke again about the carpenter. This time, the people were not laughing at all. And then the old wise woman said, "Why can't you keep laughing at the same joke, but you're always complaining about the same problems?" Isn't that right? In our minds, we're always bringing up the same problems again and again. And what use is it really? We're just going in a loop. Instead, we try in meditation, try something new, to find some silence in the mind. And just to realize how these thoughts just keep going on, and just realize that we need to try something new is already one way to create some distance between you and the thoughts. Don't make the thoughts so important as you think they are. Just give them some perspective, basically. Put some perspective on the thoughts. This is one way to quiet down your mind a bit. And also what I've been talking about before, to focus on beautiful things instead of the thoughts. Focus on joy and things like kindness. I'll come back to that, actually, to the kindness especially. There's one simile that I quite like to think about. Think about, the thoughts again. But that I like to reflect upon when I'm dealing with my own thoughts. This is one day when I was a student. I was actually, as I told you before, I think, was that on this retreat? I think so. That I lived in the city of Rotterdam, and as a student studying in another city, maybe an hour's travel away, had to go by the metro, and then by train as well, every day, back and forth. I lived so far away because the student housing was much more cheap where I lived, so it was quite nice, actually. But every day by train. And one day, I was standing on one of the train stations waiting for the train to go back to the city of Rotterdam where I lived. Now there's two train stations in the city of Delft where I studied. One is the big one, the central train station, and then there's a very small one called Delft South, because it's in the south of Delft, that's why, of course. And that's a small train station, and many trains just pass it by, and only some of the trains that stop everywhere, they stop there. And usually I go to the big train station, but depending on where I had my last lecture, I would sometimes go to the small train station, Delft South. And I was standing on the train station, Delft South, waiting for the train. And what happened? The train driver of the train coming forgot that he had to stop at that train station. And only very last minute, he started braking. And he realized, oh, this trip I have to stop at Delft South. And he went full on the brakes, because there were sparks flying everywhere from the wheels. Maybe you've seen some of those movies when trains stop or whatever. It's really like that in real life. It was really all the iron smell in the air, sparks everywhere, and really loud. Everybody was like this on the train station. And what happened? The train still overshot the train station. And I think they probably have some regulations that they can't go backing up, so he just took off and left, drove further. And then I thought, this is sort of like a simile of how sometimes I try to stop my thoughts in meditation. I just try to pull the brake and stop them all at the same time. In my mind, basically. Stop all the thoughts, be quiet, stop. But that doesn't work. Because how do they usually stop a train? Very far ahead, they just already take their foot off the pedal, and just the train gently comes into the station, and it slows down more and more, and finally it comes to a standstill in the station. Because the train is so heavy, you cannot just stop it straight away. And if you try, you'll get the ee of the train, a lot of noise, and you'll overshoot the station anyway. So the same with thoughts. When we have a lot of thoughts going on, we might want to stop them all at once. But one technique the Buddha taught us about is to gently, slowly let the thoughts settle. Because our thoughts have such a big momentum, just like a big train has a big momentum. We take it down slowly and steadily, instead of all at the same time. And the Buddha compared this to somebody who is running and then thinks, oh, why am I running? Maybe I should just walk, there's no need to run. And then they're walking and they're thinking, oh, maybe I should just stand actually instead of walking. They're standing, oh, maybe I should just sit down. They sit down, oh, maybe I should just lie down. So they go from running to lying down. Not all at once though, slowly, bit by bit. And so that's what I did this morning when I was thinking too much useless thoughts about what I'm going to talk about, which things I think about I won't talk about anyway. Instead of stopping it all at once, I was just like, okay, I'm just going to think less and less and just gently quiet the thoughts down by giving the thoughts less importance than I was. Just letting them settle down. So this is one way that you can deal with your thoughts. Don't give them so much importance, but also don't wish them all to go away all at once. Just realize that your thoughts have this momentum, this aspect that it's not easy to stop them all at once. Just slowly quiet them down. You can take as much time as you want with this. And even just going from running to walking is already slowing down. The same thing if you have 100 thoughts a minute and you go to 90 thoughts a minute, it's already slowing down. Yeah, you don't have to aim for perfection with this. But then you go from 90 maybe to 70, slowly, and you can slow it down. Yeah. Does that make any sense? Try that out when you're meditating. Because our thoughts, they often don't tell the truth and they just give us a lot of headaches often. And you'll find if you still down the thoughts, you get so much more room in the mind for other things, for feelings of kindness and joy. Because the thoughts, they sap our energy away. It's amazing how much energy thoughts actually take. I think they did at some point some studies how much different body parts, how much energy they use. And the brain was like 30% of all the energy in the human body goes to the brain, something like that. Like 30%. It's only a small part of our body, and we move around all day, and the brain is just sitting there still. You might think, oh, that doesn't use much energy, but it actually uses a lot of the energy that we get. I mean, like energy from food and this kind of stuff. And if you can still down the thoughts, I don't think they ever measured this, but I would say the brain starts using less energy because the thoughts are just one of the most energy-sapping things we have. And by stilling down the thoughts, we open up the mind for new experiences. And it also gives room, as I said before, for kindness. Because kindness is not a thought. Kindness is really an emotion that you cannot really put into thoughts. And I want to speak a bit more about kindness and acceptance and compassion, because that is sort of such an important part and sort of the theme of this mini retreat. And kindness is important towards ourselves, also important to watch other people, to be kind. Sometimes we think if we just tell people off and tell them what to do, then if we just tell them firmly, then they will do exactly what we want. But they did actually some studies where they had people, volunteers, coming into a room, and in the room they had a bowl full of freshly baked cookies. Of course, very nice smelling. And they had two groups. One group of people, they said to them, "Do not eat the cookies. If you eat the cookies, you fail the test, and that's it." And and the other group, they also presented with cookies, and they said, "Please, can you not eat the cookies? Yeah? Please don't eat the cookies. If you have any questions, please come and see us. We're next door. If you need the toilet, it's over here." So one group they were very firm with, the other group they were very kind with. Both had the same problem, to not eat the cookies. And then afterwards, after like 15 minutes in the waiting room where they had these cookies, they took the people, both groups, and they had to do some tests with a computer, something about counting numbers or something. And by that they could judge how well the groups did with their counting test. I don't know exactly what the test was, but let's say they just had to add up numbers or something like that. Something very simple. And what they found was that the group that had been treated kindly did way better than the group that was treated badly. With something to do with the cookies, which you might say has nothing to do with your ability to count numbers. But it's just something about kindness that actually makes people perform much better in life if we treat them kindly. So if you are a boss, maybe somewhere at a workplace, maybe take that into account. Treat your employees kindly, and they might perform much better. It's the same with ourselves. If we treat ourselves badly, which is sometimes a natural, unfortunate attitude that we fall into, we treat ourselves badly, especially during meditation, then it doesn't go very well. We have to treat ourselves with kindness because we deserve the kindness. Maybe I shall tell another story. Story, maybe some of you have heard. Who knows the story of Nanda Visali the ox? Nobody? Ah, you know it. Okay. This is a Buddhist story. And it is, in the Buddhist canon of text, there's a lot of stories, and one of the canons has a lot of kind of fairy tales in it. And this is a little bit of a fairy tale. It's called about Nanda Visali the ox. Nanda Visali the ox was an ox living a long time ago in India. And Nanda Visali the ox had an owner, a rich farmer. And Nanda Visali the ox told the farmer one day, "Farmer, go find the rich merchant and make a bet with him that I can pull 1,000 carts." "All right," said the farmer, "I'll do that." So he found somebody, a merchant, and said, "My ox says that he can pull 1,000 carts." "What?" said the merchant. "Impossible. Bet 1,000 coins that he can't do that." "All right," said the farmer. So they made the bet, shook hands. 1,000 coins that Nanda Visali the ox can pull 1,000 carts. So, well, very difficult to get 1,000 carts together. It took them a while, but they eventually put all the carts in line, put them all together, and then put Nanda Visali the ox in front of it. And Nanda Visali the ox took a deep breath, This is like the Arnold Schwarzenegger of oxes. He put all his muscles together and started pulling. And then the farmer, the owner, said, "Okay, you stupid ox, go and pull it. You lousy ox, I bet you can't do it, but pull, huh? You failure of an ox." And Nanda Visali, try to pull. But the carts didn't move. And then the farmer was very upset with Nanda Visali. And he said, "What? You told me that you could pull these 1,000 carts. Now I lost all that money." Well, then said Nanda Visali, "But you didn't treat me very well. Try again. Now find an even richer merchant and bet 2,000 coins that I can pull the carts and treat me well." "Okay," said the farmer. And he found another merchant and said, "Well, my ox, blah, 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 blah. 2,000 coins, bet." "Yes," said the merchant, "will bet." He can't do that, I'm sure. I've never seen an ox pull 1,000 carts. It's impossible. And so again, 1,000 carts. They put Nanda Visali, the ox, in front. Here's yoke on. Nanda Visali again took a deep breath. And he struggled and he strained. And the farmer said, "Please, you can do it. You're so kind. If you can't do it, Nanda Visali, that's okay, you know. It's only money. I don't care. I'm here for you, Nanda Visali." It's like, you know, you're my favorite ox anyway, whether you feel or not. And Nanda Visali, pulling, and yes, slowly but surely, the cart started moving. And Nanda Visali took one step, and another step, and another step, and yes, he was walking. He was pulling 1,000 carts. And the merchant couldn't believe his eyes. But the farmer won the bet. And this is the story from the time of the Buddha. And the moral of the story is obviously not go and find a strong ox and make a bet. The moral of the story is kindness towards others makes them perform much better in life. Of course, it's not important that they are physically performing better, but they will be mentally doing much better. That's the moral of the story. And also kindness towards ourselves, kindness towards our own emotions is also so important. I can't appreciate the importance of kindness in meditation. And that's why after this talk I will do a guided meditation, as I promised yesterday, specifically on kindness. And kindness and thinking seem maybe on the surface unrelated topics, but they are very much related actually. When you have thoughts that you may not like and you want to get rid of, what do? Well, I've already told you before the simile of the broken wheel. You don't go kick the wheel and say, "You stupid wheel, go away." No, you just have acceptance of the wheel. But it must go even beyond acceptance. We must have kindness as well. Once upon a time, another story actually from the Buddhist texts. Once upon a time, there was a king. Many of these stories, for some reasons, have all these kings in them. I don't know why. Maybe they were told to kings in the past or whatever. Or maybe kings were the Johnny Depps of that time or something. That's what people were always talking about. But there was another king. There were many kings during that time, actually, in India. Not just one, but many. And the king had a beautiful palace with a beautiful throne. A throne made of gold and diamonds and other gemstones. And the king would spend his days on the throne. This was, of course, the place where only the king was allowed to sit. Nobody else was allowed to sit on the throne. One day the king left to visit another country to do some of the diplomat stuff that kings do. And while the king was away, what happened? An ugly demon came into the palace. And the guards tried to stop the demon. Hey, you can't come in here, but the demon was much stronger than the guards and just pushed them away. And he walked into the palace and bam, sat right down on the throne. The guards and the other people in the palace came, hey, you stinky demon. It was a really vile demon. He was stinky and ugly, and you wouldn't want to be with this demon. And they said, get away from this throne, you ugly demon, you stupid creature. This is the king's throne. You should not be here. And with every vile word that they said, every angry thing that they uttered, something magical happened. The demon grew bigger, more ugly even, and he began to stink more with every word that they said. And then they even tried to hit the demon. Get off of here. You shouldn't be on this throne. You don't belong here. And with every hit and every ugly word, the demon just grew and grew and grew until the palace ceiling was against the demon's head. That's how big he was. And he had ugly horns and ugly teeth. Then, luckily, the king came back from his journey. And the king was a very wise king. And the king had a look at the ugly demon, and he saw what was happening. So he went up to the ugly demon and said, welcome, wonderful being, to my palace. Can I offer you a cup of tea, perhaps? Is there anything else that you need? Can I give you some food? How are you doing today? How is your family, your wife and kids? Don't know if demons have wife and kids, but... And with every kind word, you know what happened. The demon shrank. His teeth became smaller and smaller. He was less stinky. And he began to shrink and shrink. And soon enough, the demon was back to his original size. But the king kept offering him drinks, being kind to him, looking him in the eye. And the demon shrank even more and more and more until he was only this big. And then the king still treating him with kindness, and he was still shrinking, the demon was still shrinking, 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 until, poof, the demon disappeared altogether. And the throne was back to the king. And this is a simile of how we should deal with the thoughts in our mind or the emotions that we're struggling with. You've got something going on in your life, I'm pretty sure, that you are not too happy with, or in your mind. How do you deal with this? Do you treat it like, go away, stupid problem, I don't want you here, get out of my life, you don't belong, stinky problem? Or are you like the king and say, I'm here for you, I will care for you, I'll do whatever you want for you, how are you doing, etc. If you are the first way, your problem be like the demon and just grow more stinky and strong. If you are, use the second way, using kindness, compassion, then the problem will shrink slowly but surely. And that's such a wonderful story, I feel, because it shows you the strength of compassion in a very visual way. And there's a need for compassion because we all have problems in life, and that's why we need to care. Remember that yesterday during the questions and answer I asked, raise your hand if you are not perfect, and everybody raised their hand, and which they should as well. Because we are all not perfect, and we all have our little problems. And when people have problems, that's exactly the reason why we should care for them. It's not, if people were perfect and didn't have problems, there would be no reason to care for them. The same with ourselves. If we were perfect and didn't have any problems, what's the reason for caring? Monks make a lot of similes with cups because we always have a cup nearby. I remember I did the simile of the cup with the water settling down. There's another simile that Ajahn Chah, that's my teacher's teacher, made up using a cup. And he said to his audience, look at this cup. Look very closely. Do you see that the cup is broken? And the people were like, no, we don't see the cup is broken. But Ajahn Chah said, yes, the cup is broken. You might not see it yet, but there is minuscule cracks already in the cup. And one day I will accidentally drop the cup and it will break. Why? Because this cup is made out of earthenware, ceramics. But if the cup was made out of plastic, then it wouldn't break. But it is exactly because this cup is breakable, that's why I should be careful. And I should not just put it on the edge or whatever. I have to take care of this cup, exactly because it is the nature of this cup to be fragile and breakable. When I was a young man, my mother always gave me the plastic IKEA cups. Yeah, you know those ones. Why? Because she didn't want us to break them. But by always giving me plastic cups, and I say young man because she kept giving me until I was like, I don't know, 16 or whatever, still drinking out of plastic cups. I never learned how to be careful with cups. So only much later I learned how to be careful with cups. But, yeah, like glass cups and ceramic cups, that's what we are all in life. None of us is a plastic cup. We're all have tiny cracks already inside, and we're all breakable. And this is why we should learn to care for ourselves and others. Because we are not perfect. And we need compassion and kindness. And you'll find if you practice kindness and compassion, your whole life will become more rich. And you just feel much better. Yesterday somebody asked the question, if I stay in the present moment, I can do it for 15 minutes, but after that I get a bit bored and I don't know what to focus on. And then one of my suggestions was focus on kindness. And I also said you can also focus on joy or on the breath. But to focus specifically on kindness is one such strong tool that I've been using so much that I want to share that with you now in a little guided meditation where we will do the Buddhist practice of what is called metta meditation, the practice of loving kindness, where we share feelings of love and kindness for everybody and all living creatures in the world. So maybe I'll give you 5 minutes to stretch again and do other important business. Then after that we can do the guided meditation.